Nancy, we're also hearing some lawmakers don't want to deal with the angry crowds and they're avoiding doing some town halls. So how are people reacting to that?
Well, their constituents, certainly those who are more progressive, aren't happy about it, and they're looking for other ways to make their feelings known. In some cases, they're holding protests outside of their offices in their home districts. In other cases, they're flooding their Facebook pages with angry messages. But, you know, it really is a tricky decision for Republican lawmakers who come from swing districts where they rely on a lot of Democratic support in order to get elected. And they know that having a very angry, confrontational town hall with a lot of shouting back and forth may not serve them well in the next election. But avoiding those voters probably won't serve them very well either. And so they're really having to make a judgment call about what's going to work best for them. And I think it also depends on the individual lawmaker and their tolerance for discomfort. I was talking to Senator Cassidy after a very heated town hall that he held here where he and the protesters could barely get a word in edgewise. The protesters were shouting him down no matter what he talked about. And he repeatedly said, look, if you don't listen to me, we're not going to have a productive conversation. And they were shouting back, no, you're here to listen to us. We want you to know what we think. And afterwards, he said it was a lot of fun and he really enjoyed it. And he doesn't see any reason to get upset about it. But again, every lawmaker doesn't see this kind of exercise as being all that fun.
And I guess, and I imagine, Nancy, it must be difficult for Republican lawmakers without an actual replacement plan in place yet for the Affordable Care Act to defend.
Sure, although he didn't get much credit from this crowd for having that plan. In fact, it gave them something concrete to attack because they argue that the plan that he's putting forward could result in millions of people losing either their Medicaid coverage, because remember, part of the Affordable Care Act is expanding Medicaid, or losing the health care that they've gotten through the exchanges, because essentially his plan allows states to decide whether they want to opt in or opt out of Obamacare. And so there are a lot of things about his proposal that the left doesn't like, and then he's getting a lot of pushback from the right as well. And that, in a nutshell, is why so many of these progressive voters are concerned that if the GOP repeals the Affordable Care Act without a plan in place, and you can see how difficult it could be for just the Republican Party alone to find some kind of consensus on what that replacement plan would look like, Democrats worry you'll repeal the Affordable Care Act and never be able to find some kind of consensus on what to replace it with. And so that's why they are so agitated, whether or not this one particular senator has a replacement plan that they may consider to have some redeeming features to it.
And finally, Nancy, the White House believes these protests are being partially manufactured by outside activists. Clearly, in a democracy, there's always going to be some organized activism, but have you found any widespread evidence of that?
Well, the question is whether organization makes protests somehow less legitimate. I mean, the history of protests in this country, whether you're looking at the civil rights movement or women's rights, there was some organization to any of those protests. There was organization when it came to the Tea Party. People have to communicate with one another and decide where they're going to hold their protests, when they're going to hold their protests. So the fact that someone is out there sending out emails saying, let's gather at this town hall, here's when it's taking place, here's where it's taking place, doesn't automatically delegitimize the anger that those people are feeling when they show up any more than it would delegitimize Tea Party protesters when they showed up at some of these same town halls 6 years ago. Yes, they were organized, but that was part of their strength, was that they were organized at a grassroots level in their own home districts, and they were able to maintain that organization, keep up their pressure on Republican lawmakers, threaten to vote them out of office if they didn't move to the right on budget issues, on the debt, on Obamacare. And so, you know, now Democrats are trying to work from that same playbook.
It's a great point. Nancy Cordes in Metairie, Louisiana for us. Thank you, Nancy.